Well, hi everyone, and welcome into my YouTube channel and my podcast, Pushing the Limits. So today, I'm super excited to introduce you to a new longevity molecule that you may never ever have heard of. But if you're interested in the NAD pathway, if you're taking NMN and NR and all the precursors, then you want to pay attention to this. If you're into upregulating your sirtuin genes and the longevity pathways, listen, and this is a really, really exciting molecule. Okay, so I've done previous episodes on this channel on NAD metabolism with luminaries in the space like Professor Joseph Bauer and Dr. Elizabeth Yurth of the Boulder Longevity Institute and Dr. Elena Serenova, as well as my own sort of deep dives into this pathway and my effort to understand it. And it is very, very complicated. And this is a pathway that has fascinated me ever since I read the book Lifespan by Dr. David Sinclair. But the science has come a long way since that was released, and I'm really excited about introducing you to a new plethora of information on this pathway and also how we can mitigate some of the possible downsides and dangers of just supplementing with NAD precursors, which for many of us, including myself, have been doing for the past few years. Now, this is really crucial information for anyone wanting to optimize their NAD metabolism, and they need to understand it. It's really is unfortunately not as simple as putting more of a good thing into the mix and bingo, we stay younger, healthier, and more active for longer. There's a lot more nuance to this conversation. So I'm going to be going over NAD metabolism and talking especially about the salvage pathway, and in particular two enzymes that actually degrade NAD that we need to pay particular attention to, and how one of those in particular, when upregulated, can have major deleterious effects on the body. So with that in mind, let's dig in. But before we do, I do want to thank Dr. Elizabeth Yurth of the Boulder Longevity Institute and the Boulder Longevity Academy. And I really encourage you guys to go and check out what they do over there. They bring fantastic education. Elizabeth has been a friend and mentor and teacher for a long time, and she's absolutely incredible. She's also going to be the scientific advisor for one of my companies. But she's just absolutely always at the cutting edge. So shout out to Elizabeth. Thanks for bringing all this information and this complicated research to the fore, and for doing all the heavy lifting and explaining this, and also to the SSRP Institute for their work in this arena, and in particular the work of Dr. William Seeds in this area as well. So for more information on their work, I'll include their links below, and they are experts in this arena. So I'm only the messenger sharing this great info. So back to NAD. So basically we think, and the data is really supporting, that it's probably the best and safest way to restore NAD levels is to use a molecule called 1-NMA. Now, all of you have heard about NAD, and NAD is the big thing in the last few years, and let's go get our NAD infusions and take precursors like NMN and NR to build our NAD levels, because as we age, we lose NAD. And NAD is one of the critical electron donors to make ATP, or your energy currency for your cell, in our oxidative phosphorylation pathway and in a mitochondria. And we have this redox. So basically electrons are passed down a chain until we finally make ATP, which gives us energy, and that's how we survive. Now, there's a lot of data to support that as we age, we have lower NAD levels, and that low NAD levels are bad. And I would totally agree with that. You want higher NAD levels for energy. You want good NAD. The problem is that why is the NAD levels dropping? That's the part that's being overlooked. So we've all been putting in NAD precursors to increase that level, but we're missing the point. So the main reason the NAD levels are dropping is because upregulation of enzymes that are degrading NAD and taking NAD out. So if I give like you a whole bunch more of NAD or NMN and NR, then I can raise the levels for sure. But depending on how much you give and how much these enzymes are taking away, we don't really know. We don't have any idea how much is being given, how much is actually being taken away. It's like having a leaky bucket, if you like. So what is 1-NMA? Well, it's the main metabolite, or one of the main metabolites, that comes from nicotinamide, which is the breakdown product from NAD, and it's naturally made by our body. 1-NMA is naturally made by the body, And what 1-MNA is designed to do is really control metabolism and control NAD levels by blocking an enzyme called NNMT, which stands for nicotinamide N-methyltransferase. And that's the one that is of most concern. So NNMT is one of the main enzymes that's degrading your NAD. And let's look at what this does. So you've got this big bucket that needs to be full of water, i.e. NAD, but there's a hole in the bucket, okay? And the hole is actually dripping water down, as Elizabeth puts this, to feed the big dragon underneath. So that dragon, when he gets enough water, is going to kill you, okay? So that's what NMNT, when it's upregulated, it's very, very negative, and it's feeding that dragon. So if we keep giving NAD, and we have high levels then of NMNT enzyme, it's highest in the cells that you don't want to have NAD. These are the senescent cells, cancer cells, take note, cancer cells, fat cells, and all of these types of cells are also able to use the NAD and use it for their own benefit. They're feeding the dragon, okay? So that hole is feeding this dragon. And the dragon is now keeping you from being healthy. So it's a really good analogy because you can sort of picture that, the water dripping through, giving him the dragon stuff you don't want him to have. So if we just keep giving NAD and all these damaged cells have high levels of NMNT, they're going to take that NAD and they're going to use it for their own purposes. And when we're giving all this NAD and the precursors to NAD, NMN and NR, and they have no idea where it's going, that's the problem. You may look great, your labs may look great for a year or two, and when you're younger, you don't have as much NMNT and you don't have as much CD38 either, which is another one that we'll talk about. So when you get older, you have more of these. So it's the people that are older. It is the people that are inflamed and already have these disease processes that are grabbing to the NMN and the NRs and the NAD precursors. And that may be detrimental because we're upregulating the NMNT. So it's not to say that this is definitely bad, but we need to know that we're upregulating this NMNT and what we need to know to do about that. So it depends on how much NMNT you have, and it depends on how much NAD you needed, but you have no idea. So it's self-regulating. So by using this molecule that I want to introduce you to called 1-MNA, it controls the NMNT. It turns it off. Okay. NMNT, remember, is the problematic enzyme. It's being upregulated and it's feeding that dragon. So 1-MNA turns that NMNT off. Okay, so basically it's an NMNT blocker. So the dragon can't get the water. And if we look at NMNT, it's an essential contributor to almost every metabolic disease, to cellular stress, to body weight gain, to cancer. And some of the big research that's now going on in cancer is how do we actually block NMNT? So if the cancer researchers are looking to block NMNT, we've got to be careful if we're doing something that increases NMNT, right? So we want to be looking at 1-MNA because it downregulates NMNT and it's a blocker. So the cancer researchers are looking for regulators of this enzyme, and they haven't got anyone except we have this one, 1-MNA. It's an NMNT blocker. So the studies show that when you have higher levels of this NMNT, you're at risk for psychiatric diseases like schizophrenia and neurodegeneration. And a big one is Parkinson's. So if you've got Parkinson's, you really need to pay attention to this pathway. It's also involved in the progression of liver diseases. It's involved in cancer cell growth and metastasis. So basically, if you look, we know that this is blocking this enzyme is a good thing. Okay, we want to lower that NMNT. So let's now look at 1-MNA. So it's blocking the NMNT, but is it doing anything else? It doesn't actually treat the things that we think it's treating. So there are some great studies that have come out, and there was one study that was post-COVID people with post-COVID have high levels of NMNT. The long COVIDers or sometimes the COVID vaccine injuries have had high levels of NMNT So 1-MNA supplementation significantly improved the performance in a 6-minute walk test by blocking this enzyme. And basically it had anti-inflammatories and anticoagulant effects. It increased their recovery and decreased their fatigue. It also had a very potent anti-inflammatory effect on the body because it activates something called the NLRP3 inflammasome. So when that inflammasome is activated, it is linked to arthritis, metabolic diseases, and cancers. So basically inhibits the activation of that inflammasome, that NLRP3 inflammasome. It also decreases reactive oxygen species. It increases mitochondrial potential. Again, a great study on 1-MNA reducing inflammatory reactions. And then there's a study on mice that were fed a really bad, high-fat, bad diet, and that they could actually be protected from cardiac disorders by giving them 1-MNA. And we now, again, the 1-MA is regulating the energy. So always think, I don't want to be in an energy excess and I don't want to be in an energy deficit. I want to be in balance. So I don't want too little or too much. Okay, so 1-MA is going to regulate that and keep that balance. And you can take this as a supplement now, which is the exciting thing that I'm, super stoked to. This is coming from one small company in Poland and in Detalio. So we now have that in our range. I'm really excited to have it because if you are going to supplement with NMN or NR, then maybe think about putting this also in the mix, 1-NMA, or just doing 1-NMA, because it's also going to increase your NAD levels. It's going to lower that NNMT. It's going to activate your sirtuin genes, in particular SIRT1. So it's doing all those things anyway. So 1 a day is a baseline. And then if you're really sick or you're dealing with a virus or you've got some disease, then you maybe want to go to two a day. I'm using it with my mum at the moment and having some great results with it. And I think this is one supplement that if we want to understand NAD metabolism, this is really one that needs to be looked at and keeping the body homeostatic. It's not just about giving a bunch of stuff, but actually regulating this. And this is a key player because we can give this natural molecule to the body that's designed to work in a homeostatic fashion to keep everything sort of perfect. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope you are as well. So I'll be recommending it pretty much to all of my clients, anyone who has obesity or metabolic syndromes or cardiac disease or liver disease or a cancer history or high cancer risk or long COVID or fatigue issues, then this is a supplement that is really powerful. So NAD is a good thing. We want our NAD levels up, but we need to understand this balance. And it's absolutely critical to life, and not only to energy production, but for DNA repair, for chromosome stability, for neurotransmitter health, for longevity, for activating sirtuin genes. So we know all of that. But there's this one enzyme, NNMT, that when we give NMN and NR and NAD precursors and NAD infusions, we may be upregulating that NMNT, and that has very strong deleterious effects on the body, as we said, with all these metabolic disorders through to cancers, etc., Parkinson's and so on. On the other side of the equation is something called CD38. And CD38 is an enzyme that is also upregulated in anyone who's older, who has a lot of senescent cell burden, who has a lot of inflammation. And we can block the CD38 with something called apigenin. And this is quite well known. Most people know about that side of the equation, but not many know about the NMNT side of the equation. So if we block the CD38 with apigenin, we add 1-NMA to the mix, we're going to increase our NAD levels, and it's going to go to the two things that we really need it for, the three things. We need it for the sirtuin genes. We need it for the PARPs, the poly ADP ribose. We need it for ATP production. So we want it to be used for those things. We don't want it to be used to upregulate the NMNT. And when you upregulate NMNT, it also has an effect on methylation. So you can end up with more homocysteine because it upsets that balance, and you can end up with methyl donor deficiencies as well. So that's another thing that we have to think about. And we have to sort of understand that NAD is also a redox molecule. Basically, there's NAD and there's NADH or NAD plus. And these are a redox couple, and they work in synergy with each other. So when people say NAD, they're actually referring to, it's usually NAD plus, but NAD is actually both the reduced and the oxidized form. It's NAD plus and NADH. And when you truly refer to NAD, that's what you're actually saying. So we basically know that NAD has to turn into NADH. And it basically adds a hydrogen, and you've got 2 positive charges. So you have 2 negative charges and 2 electrons, and that's when it gets down to its reduced form of NADH. So there's a few things to remember about NAD. So one is that it's a carrier of energy. It donates electrons, and NADH accepts electrons. And you need to remember that it's critical in ADP production, and it's critical for every pathway that you need for ADP production, from glycolysis to the Krebs cycle to the oxidative phosphorylation cycle, all require NAD. And so we'll be dead in 30 seconds without NAD. And it's critical in a lot of other diverse cellular processes, particularly it's a cofactor for the sirtuins, as I said, and it's really important for activating sirtuins in SIRT1, one of our longevity genes. And so we need to have good NAD levels, but we need to understand this whole process. So I hope that I didn't confuse you and lose you along the way. I do want to do a deeper dive into 1-NMA. And I'm going to include some references below for some of the studies that I've talked about. If you are interested in finding out more, let me know in the comments below, and I will do more of a deep dive into the pathways that are involved. And I encourage you to go and listen to the episode that I did with Professor Bauer, and you'll see how complicated this whole pathway is. And yeah, understand this, because it's really important for slowing the aging process down, for slowing for longevity, for health span. But it's not as simple as just throwing in a whole lot of NMN and NR. That may be doing a lot of good for a lot of people to a certain point, but when we go over that point and we don't know where that point is, that's the point, that's the whole point, so to speak. We could be upregulating that NMNT, and NMNT is most definitely not what you want to be upregulating if you want to avoid all those things that we mentioned before. So think about this, and think about adding 1-NMA into the mix. Think about adding apigenin into the mix, and especially if you are still wanting to take NAD precursors, NMN and NR, then you definitely want to be blocking that NMNT enzyme. So I encourage you also just to go and type into PubMed or Google or wherever you do your research, NMNT enzyme and obesity, NMNT and cancer, NMNT and Parkinson's, and you'll start to come up with study after study that shows you how bad this NMNT enzyme can be. And so that you start to understand this whole process. As usual, I thank you for your time and attention today. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a like and a share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Come and check out the podcast as well, which we do each week. I'm always interviewing incredible people, top doctors and scientists in the world that can give you the health optimization and the health span that you're looking for. So staying up on the latest research is always really important for me, and we are evolving. And I think what we need to take away from this lesson is, we come along with something and it's fantastic and we're all excited about it, but we do need to sort of be careful and understanding the nuance. And as the science changes, we have to evolve with it and change our approach, because we don't know everything. And even like Professor Bauer said, we're in our infancy in understanding all of this NAD metabolism, and we've got a lot more to learn. So staying humble and staying a little bit cautious, and always keeping your ear to the ground about what's happening now. And so I'm really excited to bring you 1-NMA. I think it is a huge piece of this puzzle, and I think everybody should be on 1-NMA to some degree, when you're older, at least after the age of 40 or something, because it's going to help downregulate that NMNT, activate the sirtuins, give you more NAD, make sure that bucket stays fuller without the risk factors. So it's the safest way to support your NAD without the downsides. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.